After fertilization, the stamens, petals, and eventually the sepals of the flower die off and drop off. The ovules develop into seeds and are enclosed in the ovary wall, which becomes a fruit. So in this diagram here, we have illustration of how the fruit develops. The fruits develops within the ovary of the couple. The fruit begins to develop after pollination. The pollination process triggers off hormonal changes that cause the ovary to grow tremendously. So, once pollination has taken place, the ovary part of the couple is stimulated to develop into the fruit. Now, pollination stimulates the release of the hormone known as gibberellins. Which are responsible for fruit development. Now, gibberellins refers to a group of hormones that are closely related chemically, and they are responsible for fruit development. So, during fruit development, the wall of the ovary becomes the pericarp, which is the thickened wall of the fruit. And within the ovary, as it develops, as it becomes thicker, the embryo develops within the ovule. Now, as the ovary is developing into the fruit, the other parts of the plants, like the petals, wilt because they've done their function. They've played their role, which is to attract pollinating agents. Once pollination has taken place, so the petals are of no use, and the plant, in fact, reduces or drops off the petals because their presence is rather expensive, in the sense that the petals provide a large surface for transpiration, that is loss of water, and also petals consist of living tissues which will just be draining the plant resources without playing any important role. So, after pollination, parts like petals drop off. They dry and drop off. Just like the other parts of the flower that will wither away as time goes by. Now, the development of the fruit depends on pollination. If a flower has not been pollinated, the fruit usually does not form, and the entire flower withers and falls off. So, the fruit develops from the ovary, and inside the ovary, the seed develops from the ovule. A fruit usually develops and ripens about the same time as the seed is developing. Now, this is important since the fruit aids in the dispersal of the seeds. So, as the fruit is developing, simultaneously within the fruit, we'll have the seed developing, such that by the time the fruit is mature, the fruit will ripen and the rest of the flower parts will have fallen off. This fruit plays the role of protecting the seeds and also aiding in their dispersal. Now, as mentioned, without pollination, the flowers of most plants will fall off. Just like without pollination, there'll be no fertilization. And without fertilization, there'll be no seed formation. In some plants, the flower, and in particular, the carpel, may develop into a fruit even without fertilization. And now, without fertilization, there can be no seed formation, even though the fruit develops. Now, this condition in which the fruit develops even without fertilization, such that the seeds are not formed, is known as parthenocarpy. Parthenocarpy. So parthenocarpy refers to the condition in which seedless fruits develop, and this comes about as a result of ovary developing into a fruit before pollination and fertilization has taken place. So as the fruit is developing, within the fruit, seeds will develop. Here is another illustration of how a different type of fruit does develop from a flower. So here's the flower. This is the ovary that has several ovules. This ovary grows in size, and as it grows in size, the petals and the stamens dry, wither, and fall off, such that eventually what is left is the developed ovary, which is in fact the fruit. Now, the different types of fruits. A fruit is not necessarily succulent. Even this pod that you see here is a fruit. It's only that the walls are not succulent, so they do not really appear as the typical succulent fruits. But remember, in all plants, the fruits develops from the ovary. So at maturity, the ovary, that is the fruit, may be succulent or it may be dry. In this particular case, this is a dry fruit. So within the developing ovary, as the ovary develops into a fruit, seed develops within the ovary. And the seed develops from the ovules that are contained within the ovary. So after fertilization, the zygote undergoes repeated mitotic division and develops into the embryo. The embryo then differentiates into three parts. The plumule, that is the embryo. Now after fertilization, you have the zygote. This is the zygote that has formed. After fertilization, it develops into the embryo. Remember, in flowering plants, there is double fertilization. The first one forms the primary endosperm nucleus, the other one forms the zygote. The primary endosperm nucleus develops into the endosperm, which is a storage structure within the seed. The integuments that form the wall of the ovule become the seed coat. The zygote becomes the embryo. Now the embryo differentiates into three parts. There is a plumule, that is the young shoot, the radicle, and cotyledons, which may be one or two depending on the nature of the plant. As the seed develops, development depends on the nature of the plant. Here we have the embryo, then this is the endosperm, and then the seed coat that develops from the integuments. Now there are two types of seeds depending on the type of plant. One, there is that type of plant in which there's only one cotyledon. Here, this is a cotyledon. This type of seed is known as monocotyledonous plant. There is usually a large, massive endosperm that acts as the main food storage structure. Examples of such plants that have one cotyledon, thus they are monocotyledonous seeds, is the maize plant. In the maize seed, there is one cotyledon, large endosperm, all of which are enclosed by a seed coat. The embryo consists of a coleoptile, which is a protective sheath that covers the embryonic shoot known as the plumule. The embryonic root is known as the radicle, and it is covered by a protective sheath known as the coleorhiza. So these make up the embryo. This is a typical monocotyledonous seed. Monocotyledonous because there's only one cotyledon. The other category of seed are the dicotyledonous seeds. In dicotyledonous seeds, there are two cotyledons. There is a radicle, a plumule that make up the embryo. And of course, there is the seed coat developing from the integuments. Usually, such dicotyledonous seeds have a portion just below the plumule that is known as the hypocotyl that plays a very important role in germination of the seed. Now, there are two categories of seeds also. Apart from the number of cotyledons present, there are some seeds that at maturity have an endosperm that is present. These are known as the endospermic seeds, like the maize. The maize is endospermic because the endosperm remains and forms the main food storage structure. In other seeds, just such as the common bean, the endosperm disappears because it is quickly absorbed by the cotyledon and is stored within the cotyledons, such that at maturity, such seeds lack the endosperm, and they are said to be non-endospermic. So we have endospermic seeds, the ones that have an endosperm at maturity, and the non-endospermic, those that lack an endosperm. Remember, the endosperm was present initially because it is formed from the second fusion. But as the seed develops, the endosperm gets absorbed into the cotyledons. So in the non-endospermic seeds, the cotyledons are the main food storage structures. But in the endospermic seeds, the endosperm is the main food storage structure, with the cotyledon acting more of a protection. It protects the embryo from the massive endosperm, and also it acts as a conduit or a channel through which food reserves can flow from the endosperm into the growing embryo during germination.